Hi, I'm Chris Hallberg, the Business Sergeant. I'm an author of the Business Sergeant's Field Manual, military-grade business execution without the yelling and push-ups. I'm a speaker, I'm an executive coach, and I'm an EOS implementer. And I'm here to teach you how to be a business sergeant so you can stop screwing around and finally become the leader that your team secretly wants and needs you to be. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness so that you can reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to take an insider look at how business can be combative and why, as leaders, we might need to think and act a little more like a business sergeant by going back to the very basics. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we're also grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. So thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. And remember, as always, we need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, sales leader, entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, you know that teams and keeping them loyal to you is top of mind for most businesses these days. But the question is, can we set up the team if the business itself hasn't gone through bootcamp? Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out. Our guest today on this episode is Chris Hallberg. Now, Chris Hallberg is a seasoned business consultant. He's a United States Army veteran, and he's the author of the Business Sergeant's Field Manual. He's also ranked as #9 in Inc.'s top 50 leadership management experts, and he is going to put on the jackboots, and we are going to dive right in. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Hallberg!
Great to be here, Doug.
It's good to have you on, man. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this show very much. I'm excited about it. You and I had a great conversation a while back, and we were prepping for the show. And I know there's a lot of things that are aligned, and some things that maybe not so aligned. And I'm excited to get into it. As we look at business today, there have been many changes in leadership style from that of 20 years ago, for instance. I'm even surprised that many of the military folks that I work with and speak to also, some of whom are still in the military, some of whom are my friends, and we speak about the need for more transparency and authenticity in leadership. I want to start there. Do you see that is needed, or is it something else?
Well, I think transparency is related to trust. And when you have the trust of another human being and they have yours, you're at a different altitude with your conversations. In the absence of that open and honest communication, you get a lot of politics. Mm-hmm. And politics isn't an efficient way to be a leader, and it's not an efficient way to run a business.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. So many of us today, including me, are talking a lot about the why. You know, that we need to find our why. And I'm not saying my version of going for why is the same as anybody else's, because I know my version's a little more Sergeant Major. But you, on the other hand, are talking a lot about being a Sergeant Major. That business leaders have to go to what you describe often as the dirty and often hard side of the how rather than the why. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that's where we got to get this across to people clearly it's vital that you have your why, but there's also the how piece. And as you say, it's dirty and it's hard. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking to the why, once you have a why that you can opt into, right? If an email marketer sends you an email message that you didn't sign up for, they call that spam. So you got to provide a double opt-in for all of your people to say, this is our unit, this is our mission, this is our vision, this is who we are, this is why we do it, and this is what we do. And if you don't want that, this isn't the unit for you. You need to go find your unit, because life's way too short to surround yourself with people that don't want you want. So just to set the context there.
Sure.
And then into the how, it's just being a more deliberate leader, right? Not tiptoeing around the tulips and making suggestions, but showing the example, being the example you want others to follow. A great leader is willing to do everything that they ask their people to do.
Absolutely.
Right? And people learn a lot more by showing them how to do it rather than telling them how to do it. So you gotta lead from the front. You gotta be somebody who's a coach, a mentor, a confidant. At the same time, somebody that's not in the friend zone and can be your boss and say what needs to be said, so you can be your very best at work.
But don't you think that's something that many leaders really struggle with today? Because it feels like for many leaders that there is these two places. One is the command and control old school leadership, and okay, I'm hoping at least that most leaders have got that that's not going to work anymore. But at the other side of it, because people tend to polarize, the other side of it is I'm now your best mate, and that doesn't work either. So how do you address that from your point of view of being this business sergeant?
Yeah, and I think it starts with setting the correct context and what's happening when you don't have the license to have those tough conversations. Upper management doesn't support middle management in doing what they know needs to be done, and they're handcuffed. Their hands are tied. They're fighting with one arm tied behind their back. So they just give up. And they do the amount necessary, and that trickles all the way down. So just to make a strong point here is this has to start at the very top. All of these techniques that I'm describing would fail miserably without the support of senior management. So senior management is tired of watered down results, cultural issues, high turnover, lack of profit. And as soon as they're sick and tired of that, and they're fed up, and they're ready to make some real change, it starts there with saying, you know what, we're going to be an exceptional company, and not everybody's going to fit in here. I personally believe that we've become too inclusive in not only society but in business. And let me go deep on this for a second.
Yeah, please.
I'm not talking about not having a diverse workforce, because I believe your workforce should mirror the population you serve. And the more diverse, the better.
Sure.
I'm talking about value diversity, Dove.
So tell us about that. What do you mean by that? Because I think as soon as you say anything like that, it's like, oh, everybody's heckles are up, and oh my God, you're a judgmental shit, and you want to make it only about the white guy or whatever it might be,
Yeah, and that's why I put a big disclaimer on that is, I'm not talking about that kind of diversity.
No.
I don't care what sex, race, religion, orientation you are. None of that matters at the end of the day. And I think we should mirror the population that we serve as closely as we can. What I'm talking about is value diversity. What I value from 9 to 5, and what gets me excited, winning and being surrounded by A players and being successful. And I'm not just talking about making lots of money. I'm talking about achieving goals and the great feeling, helping other people. If you don't value a strong work ethic and the ability to have hard conversations, just, if you like the touchy, feely, fuzzy, you can't say that and I can't say this, then 95% of business environments I'm describing are overly complex, overly politically correct, and their results are severely watered down. The 5% of companies that I like to work with are the ones that said, you know what, we're going to break a few eggs while we make some of these great omelets, and we're okay with that. You still have to follow employment law. You still have to treat people as you'd want to be treated. I'm not talking about being a raving lunatic and taking liberties with other human beings. What I'm talking about is creating an environment where we can protect that nucleus, those very best employees, and keep the C players away from the A players, so they can maintain that level of proficiency. Because an A player will become a C player much faster than a C player will become an A player when you mix the two groups.
Yeah, I spoke about that in my last book, in Fiercely Loyal. One of the things I said was that you have to think of the old union rules. And that is, if you put somebody who's a hard worker in a union situation, they will get shit for working so hard. And so pretty soon they'll start working at the union level. And I'm not against unions, by the way. Actually, I'm pro-union, but healthy unions. But it's the same thing. It's like, I think that in the drive for this politically correct environment, which I think has some really upside, some really great upside, but like most things, the pendulum has swung too far, and the result is now that, well, I can't really fire you because even though you're a lazy shit, and even though you don't really care about the same things as we do. And I think that in leadership, we have, very much to your point, we have got to say, these are the boundaries for us. In other words, as you said, what was it you said? If the rules of this unit don't meet you, great, fantastic, go find somewhere else. But I think that a lot of leaders are afraid of that, Chris. I think they're afraid of saying that. How do you guide that leader who's saying, yeah, but you don't understand, man. I'm working in an environment here. It's like, if I say the wrong thing, legal is up my ass.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And again, when you have the very top says, this is what we're going to do. So first, you got to treat everybody the same, right? You can't treat people differently. That's a big legal and HR flag. So there shouldn't be two sets of rules. One's for the in crowd and one for the out crowd. That's divisive, by definition, right? Having two groups.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, if you just have to ask yourself, do I have to tolerate this behavior, right? And I see a lot of leaders that are unnecessarily handcuffed. You ever see the thing where somebody draws a circle and they put an ant in the middle, and the ant won't leave the circle? They feel like the drawing is like a 10-foot tall fence.
Yeah.
So it's that circle that we put around ourselves, or management puts it there, or the media puts it there, society puts it there. Make your choice of where you think it's being placed. But I just tell people, do you really have to tolerate that? Is there a law that says that you have to accept poor behavior? So what you need to do is you need to document clear expectations, both behaviorally and professionally. Yeah. And when people can't meet those, then they come to you and they opt out on their own because you were so clear. When people fail to create those, to create the reality we want people to operate in, that's that fuzzy gray area where what you just said absolutely exists every day. So you really have to get rid of that gray area and just say, this is okay, this is not okay, and then enforce it uniformly. Doesn't matter who you are. The number one performer 1 quarter ago violates one of these rules, they're going to be taking the task just like the new employee that doesn't quite have it yet.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, right, is getting rid of that clicky thing of, I mean, one of the things I said to some of the leaders I'm working with, you may lose your number one player. And they go, whoa, that person brings in X amount. And I go, yeah, but here's what you don't know, is because that person's a diva, all the people who play underneath that person play at a much lower game than they're capable of. And you get rid of the diva and everybody else's game comes up, and I promise you won't miss the person. And they're like, really? And watch it happen. And every time. And it's because they go, this person gets away with it, so why would I bother? It's going to be different for me. Well, when that person's gone and they can see that rule applies to even when you're a top player, it shifts everything. Because like you're saying, it's that understanding of this is how we operate. And I think we're all very nervous about it, but we've got to get that that's what it is. Now, in your book, the Business Sergeant's Field Manual, You said that we need to adopt a more military-based team building and operational mindset. Tell us what you mean by that, because that is pretty scary for a lot of people. We can, I said you've been a man in uniform. We can see behind you that you've done that in multiple different ways. Tell us what you mean by building an operational mindset and what that means.
Well, I think it first starts with commitment, okay? When you enter military service, you're signing up anywhere from 2 to 6 years of your life. So if you just decide to change your mind, it's not going to go well for you. The MPs are going to come get you and bring you back to work. We don't have that level of commitment in the civilian workforce. So just starting with, do you really want to be here? Because let's face it, you spend a third of your life at the office surrounded by these people. And if you're not just absolutely excited to get into the office and do the work and be around your team, man, that's a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's a long, slow way out to pasture. So also, I'll also point out that the subtitle of the book is Military Grade Business Execution without the yelling and push-ups, meaning you don't have.
I was looking forward to those.
Yeah. Well, that's all. We could take a break and knock a few out. It's always good. It's good for you any way you slice it. But at the end of the day, you don't have to be a wild man screaming, yelling, belittling people. That's a drill sergeant. Those people turn citizens into soldiers. I'm talking about a senior unit sergeant, somebody with a bunch of stripes on their arm. They've seen a lot. They're a mentor. They're a coach. It's one of those things that they take care of their people. The leaders that are most respected in the military aren't necessarily the highest ranking ones. I've seen plenty of senior officers and non-commissioned officers walk into the room, think they got the juice. They leave the room and everyone's laughing and bagging on them, and it's quite embarrassing. And I've met other people that you'd take a bullet for them. You'd run in front of a train to make sure that they'd be okay, because that's what they would do for you. So it's about being committed to not only the mission and the team, but it's about being a great leader. You shouldn't be a leader for a parking spot or a title or a corner office or your ego, right? You should be a leader because you generally enjoy lifting other people up, and winning as a team is super, super sweet. Oftentimes, when you pull off a complex operation with a bunch of people and you're able to do something that no one has been able to successfully accomplish, that feels amazing. And that's not going to happen without great leaders and great followers.
Now, you talk a lot about the how. So can you walk us through some of the strategy here so that our viewers, our listeners can go, okay, I can go do this? What would be a this they can do to sort of get us on track with what it is you're talking about?
Okay, great. Thank you. Two main premises of the book. First, you need to adopt a business operating system. The military and paramilitary organizations are full of operational procedures. When this happens, you do that. When that happens, you do this. If nothing happens, do nothing or do this, right? Okay. So that's the first premise. The second one is that mindset where we're really going to look out for each other and we're going to create that team. So that business operating system, there are several commercially available on the marketplace today. The one that I choose to use with my clients is a process called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS for short, based on the book Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business by my now good friend Gino Wickman. So as a business coach prior to the tool set, I had all kinds of mixed results. I was given the military team-based mindset, and it resonated with some, not so much with others, and it was a bit fuzzy. Now that I had a system to fall back on, and what I found is that when you have a system and something happens, there's a lot of safety in that system. Prior to that, some people really got to stick their necks out, and sometimes somebody else will come along and collect it, or you're not willing to extend that social capital in the office, even if you're right. But when the system says, "Hey, we should do something," what does the system say? Well, the system says this, and everyone else says, "Well, what should we do?" Well, let's just do that. There becomes a platform, a scaffolding or framework then to then execute in a military-like fashion, because we already know who we are and why we do what we do. We know who the right people are because they share our core values. We understand who's in the right seat because they get it, want it, and have the capacity to do the work. And if any of those things are not right, we're going to have problems. So without that framework or that system, it's really difficult to share this mindset. So the book is about, picking an operating system. Again, I'm not here to sell EOS, although I think it's the best. Find an operating system so people have to stop making it up every day. And we now have something to kind of give us solace and comfort. And then when things pop out of line or people behave badly, then we can be more that military, I'm sorry, that's not appropriate. You might have got away with that at another company, but we don't do that. We take our culture and we take our business results very seriously, almost life and death. But of course, being in business isn't nearly like serving overseas or something like that. But let's just say we raise the stakes a bit, and now we have a framework to operate it. You put those two things together. Ever since I put those two things together, really big things have been happening for my clients. So they essentially asked me to write this book, to share this message with the world. So that's what I did.
And at the same time, we are today, excuse me, we are living in a time where entrepreneurs are the new rock stars. You and I, as we talked about before, are in the same age bracket, and we know that everybody who was our age wanted to be in a rock band, and many of people did, and some of them failed miserably. But everyone wanted to be in a rock band because that was the glory. Today's rock stars are entrepreneurs, and very few people seem to understand. Particularly about themselves, that entrepreneurs and business people are two very different things. And what you're talking about here, adopting a business operating system and stop making shit up as you go along, that seems sort of anti-entrepreneurial to many who think that entrepreneurship is flying by the seat of your pants. How do you talk to those folks who are very fly by night, not because they're flakes, but because they are very creative?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. There is a position within the system that's called visionary, right? Mm-hmm. The visionary seats, usually the founder, and their idea is not to manage anyone or be responsible for about anything other than being wild and crazy and having ideas. The problem is, if you got a bunch of visionary people sitting around, you got great ideas, exciting conversations, but not a lot of shit's getting finished. A lot of stuff's getting started.
Right.
So a visionary needs what we call in the EOS system an integrator. An integrator is the second in command. It's the chief operating officer. It's the president. It's someone who makes sure that vision gets down to the ground and has become a reality. Mm-hmm. So it's about this system is about getting people that are subject matter experts and all part of a business that you can scale rapidly and successfully, and getting out of their way. Most wild and crazy entrepreneurs have their hands in so many different jars. There's no semblance to it, so they get lucky, right? So what we talk about in the entrepreneurial operating system is getting the right people in the right seats. Mm-hmm. So we could still be fun and crazy, but if I got a sales guy in a finance role, the books aren't going to square. No. You can't round up your tax returns. It doesn't work like that. Vice versa, if I have a finance or operationally minded person in our sales department leading our sales team, you're not closing too many deals. No. You're talking people to death, and you're getting lost in the weeds, right? So what I'm saying is, you just got to know yourself. And as I'm a visionary entrepreneur, I'm pretty sure you're one too. Just following you and making some observations. If I'm going to start another big company someday, probably won't, but maybe will. I need a team to come with me to execute the vision that I'll be having, and I'll stay in my lane, because a visionary in an operations seat is 90 days of brilliance followed by a horrible crash after they get bored. And visionary people have, commonly referred as ADD, the gift of the gab, great at sales and marketing, big relationships. But that's a necessary position. So use a football team or a basketball team or whatever sport. The goalie doesn't score a lot of goals, and that's okay, but he stops a lot of the opposing team's goals. So it's really about crystallizing what our area of expertise is. So in the military, a tanker, someone who drives an armored tank, doesn't have to be good at operating demolitions or a sniper rifle or field surgery as a medic. But the reason why the military is so darn effective is they have military occupational specialties. So this is just about first determining who's going to do what, one set of eyeballs to look at for everything in the, so when you have shared accountability and you want to take them to task, this is what happens. It wasn't me, it was them.
Right.
When you have one set of eyeballs to look for and something's not going right, there's no excuses, only accountability. And either they're doing the job or they're not doing the job. If they're doing the job, great, they can stay. If they're not doing the job, we need to find somebody pretty quickly that can, because the rest of the team is being held back because of that failure. And that's exactly how it works in the military, not as much in business. And that's why this approach has really taken hold with close to 100 companies that I've worked with.
That's fabulous. And actually, talking of the companies you've worked with, walk us through some examples so that we can understand what this means in practicality. Because I agree with you. I'm certainly more entrepreneurial minded. I'm a high creative. I've got a new idea every 10 minutes. And, ideally in a big business, I would have a whole operational team, including a COO, who I could throw ideas at, who would go, yeah, that's full of shit. That's never going to work. We can't do that. Or, fantastic, I'm going to put the team on that, and we're going to make that happen.
Right.
Most of us who are entrepreneurs are not at that level, but, many of our viewers and listeners are in that top, echelon of business. And I think that oftentimes the leader loses sight that they need to have that vision too. So they become pushed by the deadlines and the bottom line. And so there's not a lot of fresh ideas coming through. Walk us through, because I get this side of like, let's get to the hard rules and this is what we got to do. And I get the piece of obviously around the entrepreneurship, but it seems like what you're talking about is how to bring those two together. So walk us through some examples of having done that, what happens.
Yeah, I mean, when I work with a new client, first step is to be really transparent. This is what it is. This is what it not is. I don't want to be a consultant. I want to be a teacher, a facilitator, and a coach. Mm-hmm. It's a train the trainer thing, because if you become dependent on me and I'm not there, you're not going to be okay. So I need to model this behavior. So the companies I work with are entrepreneurial. I work with a few larger nonprofits, but they had to commit that they were going to be entrepreneurial nonprofits and not the ones that wanted to hide out and not be accountable. And I work with some corporate people too. So on the low end, 2-3 person teams, $500,000 in sales, right? On the high end, 10,000 employees and $500 million a year in sales. I would say the average company that I work with and where this process really works the best are these privately held entrepreneurial companies, maybe 50 to 200 employees, 5 to 100, 200 million in sales, something like that.
Right.
Publicly traded companies that I work with, their hands are tied a little bit more for some of the stuff we talked about, earlier in the show.
Sure.
So I want to be with scrappy entrepreneurs that can call their shots and really can do whatever they want to. They just have to do it within the boundaries of, regulations, laws, and good business practices.
So what's happened when you put it in place with those companies? Walk us through experiences.
Within 3 or 4 months, I hear things like, I don't even recognize this place. This is amazing. And to go back to what you were talking about just a few minutes ago, that wrong person, when you fire that person and everyone else elevates, right? It's like that rose bush. You got three beautiful or one beautiful rose, one that's half dead, and the other one that's totally dead. You clip off the dead one, and the one that's half dead looks like the beautiful one because the vine only has so much nutrients to give, right? Think about how many times you've let that wrong person go. How many people come up to you within minutes or days of that and said, "Oh, you should have did that years ago.
Of course,
oh, I saw that coming." Yet where were those people when this person was behaving this way, right? So my whole point is, usually the first thing we do is we identify the wrong people. So the first thing I do is get a bunch of people fired. That's the true story. It's ugly. It's dirty. It's not fun. But when you replace those bad people with great people, the whole organization just moves forward. Even people without tribal knowledge, institutional knowledge of how you operate. Somebody that was a top 20% performer, I don't even care what they did. You can train, unless you're splitting atoms or nuclear fission, most things can be learned. So I think people get hung up on, how long is it going to take me to train somebody? The right person, they're going to learn it in half the time you did. And that's hard for people to wrap their heads around. But once you put the right people in the right seats, you might not agree with this, but business becomes really easy. It's like you're cheating. It's so easy. I find that because you have the wrong people in the wrong seats, most leaders, most managers, regardless of the scale, whether you're a small solopreneur or you're a huge conglomerate, once you put the right people in the right seats and get out of their way, the brain damage stops. You're not spending 50, 60% of your time as a leader fixing hurt egos and the politics or the beauty contest. It's about the work, baby, and it's a lot of fun.
It's interesting, though, isn't it, Chris? I mean, because as Shane Green and I were having a conversation about this, and the war on talent won. Talent has the power. And the downside of that is that a lot of leaders feel like, there's so much competition for good people and it's hard for me to get good people. And they do settle for B players and C players because they don't see how to get an A player. But one of the things, and I want to know your feedback on this, because one of the things I say is you won't get an A player until they know you're an A team. And an A team is not saying you're the number one on the Fortune 500. That may or may not be the case, but that your purpose is rock solid clear, your mission is rock solid clear, your culture is rock solid clear, what you're about and who you are, it's so crystal clear to everybody. I mean, nobody goes to work for Apple and doesn't know what Apple does. Nobody goes to work for Google and doesn't know what Google does. The reason they're top companies is because it's very clear what they do. And you go in there and you go, I don't like the culture. It's out. Good night, Vienna. And I think that that's part of the problem is that, you were talking before about this politically correct morphing, and I see it on two sides. I see it with the employees, that they go in saying, well, I could work here, as opposed to saying, this is who I am. Do they fit with me? And vice versa for the company. This is who we are. Do you fit for this? Because if you don't, it's okay. It's better for us to muddle along than it is for us to have the wrong person in the place. And I just don't think there's enough balls on either side to step into that. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of balls, regardless of your sex, whatever.
Yeah, gonads, use gonads.
Or intestinal fortitude, guts,
right.
Whatever you want to call it, right? Versus testicular fortitude, which is not the right comment here, right? So it's because of that. And so back to the A players, okay? Yeah. An A player walks into the room and sees a bunch of C players, they're out the door just quickly, right? An A player wants to be surrounded by A players because they're challenged. It validates their A status. It invigorates them and drives them. People want to be developed into A players. And how does that? You surround yourself with A players. So C players are a dime a dozen. You could hire one in the next minute if you wanted to, right? They're literally limitless. But I'm talking about the top, 15, 20% of the workforce.
No.
And a side note on this that's relevant is for business people, a lot of times they don't want to get off their wallet and pay for an A player. They want A results, but they want to pay C wages. Let me share an observation, if I may.
Please.
And that there is a profit margin, an exceptional one with A players, and here's why. When you hire an A player, you generally don't have to pay them 2x of a C player, even though an A player pretty much does 2x of a C player. You pay them 1.2, 1.4, maybe 1.6 of a C player, and that's acceptable in the marketplace. But think about that for a second as a businessman. Look, you're paying 1.4x and you're getting 2x. There is a profit margin in having A players. A small team of A players can run circles around a very large team of C players. So once you have the guts to get rid of the C's and recruit A's and do more with A's, all you need is a couple of 3-4 nuclear base A's, whatever you want to call it, to build around. And then, a B player, just for the record, is someone with A talent, but shows up with like C performance or C mentality. So you could coach a B to A, but it's, a C is somebody who just probably doesn't have the capacity to be an A, doesn't want to be an A.
Your point is so well taken here, and I think people got to pay attention to this, is that, first of all, as you said, A players want to be surrounded by A players. But if you commit to putting A players in place, that will bring up your B players to A's. And this is what people think, because your B players will self-insert or self-eject. They will go, you know what? I got to bring up my game to stay here, or I can't cope and I'm out. And that either way is really good. Either way is
super good.
Spectacular, because now we know you're not a fit. Fantastic, off you go. Or, wow, Bob, you're playing a much bigger game now. Because there is that sense of challenge and lift. But if everybody's playing at B, why the hell would I play at A? We're back in that union mindset again. So it's a very important thing. Is this the way you've always been, or was there a transformation for you? Was there something that turned you around?
Well, I could tell you when I got into leadership and management in the civilian world after leaving uniform, no one told me I wasn't in uniform anymore. So I operated the same way. I was in sales and then sales management, then became a sales executive. So I would take a lot of the stuff I learned in the military from the leaders that I really wanted to emulate, the senior leaders that were just gods, in my eyes.
Yeah.
And I just stole a lot of their great material, right? And modeled that behavior. And, some people really liked it and some people didn't. And if you didn't, then I'm probably not the right leader for you. And that's okay, once again.
Sure.
So I don't think I've changed much. I've had to soften, naturally, the hardcore military leader into a business leader, because there's certain things you can do in the military that you just can't in the civilian world, right? So you have to modify it, roll it back. But the spirit, the heart, the warrior spirit, it's the same. You can't take that out of me.
No.
I wanted to be in the military since I was 5 years old. Fathers on both sides, grandfathers on both. I come from a long line of service, and the military gave me a lot of discipline and focus when I was 17 years old. And, I was either going to be a cop or a criminal. I don't think there was any middle ground for me. It was all extreme. Go big or go home was the mantra, my family had growing up. We're very loud. We're very, boisterous, cantankerous. And that's who we are as Hallbergs. And, we're not really ashamed of that. So I think the military helped. But at the end of the day, this approach that I'm taking, it's highly effective. The results are there. It's not for everyone. You're right about that. But for people that are willing to go there, it's an amazing vehicle to help them get there much faster, much safer, and have a lot of fun. everyone just thinks of the military as kicking indoors and, taking names and doing war. The military is fun. The camaraderie, the team building. I talk to a lot of veterans. I know you work with veterans. I work with veterans too. And the number one thing they miss about the military is that togetherness.
Camaraderie.
And the fact that at the office, people are putting sharp objects in their back, not blocking them, So I think there's a ton of this that could be beneficial here. In my little part of the world, I see it. It's happened too many times for me not to be completely convinced and drinking all the Kool-Aid I could stomach. But as other people are brought to this, they have to again say, can I use this? Could this work for me? I think it can, but it starts with what you called it out. It's guts. You got to have the guts. You got to be committed. If you're interested in something and it's not going well, you're going to move on to another interest. When you're committed to something, it doesn't matter what happens. We're going to go over it, under it, around it, maybe even through it, because we're going there. Let's go. And that's a night and day difference between those two mindsets, once again.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I just watched Gary Oldman in The Darkest Hours. Have you seen that movie?
I haven't, but I'm a big Gary Oldman fan.
You're not? Oh, you are?
Yeah, I'm a Gary Oldman fan. I just don't remember that title.
It's brand new.
Memory for
it's
movies
brand
isn't
new,
very good.
And he's playing Winston Churchill.
Oh, okay.
And the lead up to Dunkirk. And the level of commitment of the man, everyone around him is talking about negotiating with Hitler and finding a peace treaty and all the rest of it. And he's like, and the 9-word speech, never give up, never give up, never give up, is there. And he does a brilliant job, by the way. Gary Oldman does a superb job. But it's that, he's not interested. He's committed and sending, civilian boats to go pick up soldiers at Dunkirk, across the British Channel. It's just like, it's superb. But it's that level of commitment that is extraordinarily rare. And I think it's in the time that we live in, it seems to be even more rare. But at the same time, this is what I want to go to here, is the distinction between commitment and rigidity. Because when we talk military, a lot of people, including me in the past, would have gone automatically to thinking it's rigidity. Talk to us about what you see as the difference between those two things.
Yeah, rigidity is being unflexible. It's this way, no other way. Being committed is a state of mind. It's giving yourself to something and knowing that when you're committed to that higher power, whatever that is for you, a lot of humans get a lot of solace in committing themselves to something greater than themselves. And that's back to that team, whatever team, a sporting team or a business team or a military team. Rigidity is what civilians think the military is about.
Sure.
You only have to make your bed like that in basic training. Then you can have a queen size bed with a pillow top. You just wear camouflage to work and blow shit up. Right. But you have to be flexible in how you're gonna, right? And you have to improvise, adapt, and overcome. So one of my favorite sergeants told me, he said, "Listen, Hallberg, you need to lead, follow, or get the fuck out of the way." Okay? And in order to do that, you need to be flexible to understand that day, right now, which one of those am I going to do? I don't care which one you do, just do one of those. Right. Sitting there and not being able to commit or be adaptable, the opposite of being rigid or flexible, that's the problem that we have.
But I think that a lot of people don't know the difference in themselves. And I think it's something that comes with experience. So tell us something that you, for me, I've seen this in every leader I've ever worked with, is there was something they used to do that they thought was good. And then they realized, shit, this don't work. I thought it was good. I thought it was great. thought it was the thing to do, but it actually isn't, and they've had to adapt. What was something that you went through with that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say on a macro level here, millennials in the workforce. Now, this year, next year, the number one generation in the workforce.
They already are, yep.
Yeah, so we're here. Millennials don't really like to be told what to do. They want to know the why before you get into the what. The media's said they're entitled, said they're, lazy. The millennials I work with don't look like that, right?
No,
of course, I'm working with high-performing leaders. So in all fairness, but my point is, instead of telling somebody how to do it, why don't you ask them how they think they should be done? And as long as your 3 or 4 outline points, your checkpoints, your touch points are in line with what the business needs, let them fill in the blanks. Let them do it their way. Let them customize it. And let me double down on this point. If you need to create a process, instead of the old guys and gals coming down from the top floor and saying, I want to see this done this way and that way, and that's not the right way to do it. And in the old way, the change that you're looking for here, I would have just said, listen, I know more than you, do it this way. When you get some gray hairs, some gray whiskers, then you could tell me how to do it. I've learned that doesn't work anymore. Not in the military, not in the business world, not raising your kids, right?
No.
For your listeners that have children, you'll find that because I said so, doesn't work like it did in 1955, right? Let's be clear.
Really?
So yeah. So when you tell somebody, okay, let's create this process together. Here are the broad brushstrokes of what we need to achieve as a team. So here are the major touch points. I'm going to leave you guys alone, and I want you guys to tell me how to do it. And then I'm going to come back tomorrow. I can't wait to see what you brilliant young minds have come up with. Unless they've created a total cluster, I'd come in there and say, oh, my God, this is beautiful. This is way better than I could have did it. High five, everybody. Move out down the road. They'd say, hey, that guy's a pretty good leader. Oh, by the way, they will follow that process with a smile on because they created it.
Absolutely.
And they love 100% of their ideas and about half of ours by design. So if you're into Jedi mind tricks, that's the one that I've learned is surround yourself with bright people, specifically millennials. They have a totally different way of attacking problems, seeing solutions. And if it's just up to the silverbacks to figure everything out, when the consumers are primarily this younger demographic, that's a huge disconnect. So I think letting go of your ego and, again, surrounding yourself with people that are way smarter than you with totally different perspectives, that leads for an amazing environment where people will be happy to follow those leaders because you're getting out of their way. They don't
Absolutely.
follow you. You're like pointing in that direction, and then off they go. And then they come back and you pat them on the back and tell them a great job. And they'll go out tomorrow and achieve amazing things when you give them that framework.
That's great. I fully agree with you, and I think it's a poignant point. Let's get a little personal for a minute. There's a military term that I like. Never served in the military, never intended to serve in the military, but there are certain things that I really appreciate about it. And one of the terms is the hill you're willing to die on. And the way I bring that home to people is say, what is it that you fought against or for as long as you can remember that is immovable in your life? It's like, you know what? I will fight for that with my last breath. What is that for you, Chris?
Well, I mean, my family, of course.
I'm not going to let you get away with family because that's the easy answer.
Yeah, well, I would say, okay, so being myself, integrity.
Integrity.
Not changing. Now, I mentioned earlier that, I've had to shave off some, sharp edges and round those off so they're safer to be around. But at the end of the day, if somebody in the middle of my day said, you know what, Chris, I don't appreciate your style, your language, the way that you address me, I need you to change, I'd say you need to find another coach. Mm-hmm. So the one hill I'm not willing to die on is to be somebody other than I am. I've tried that before, And in the biggest business failure of my entrepreneurial career, I was doing something that I wasn't passionate about with people that I wasn't comfortable with, and I lost pretty much everything, about 10 years ago. And it took me a while to kind of make another run up that hill. Mm-hmm. And what I determined from that after much soul searching was, you know what? You were trying to be somebody you weren't, and it cost you dearly. So to answer your question more directly, this is who I am. If you don't like me at 100 proof, find another brand. Good luck to you. Godspeed. But this is who I am, and I'm not changing for anybody.
Personally, I can't relate to that at all. So.
Yeah, what? I think we're brothers from another mother. Yeah,
definitely from brothers from a unit. I don't know what the unit is, but
yeah.
Who would you say is a leader that you look at and you think they're doing it right?
I always go with Richard Branson, the Virgin founder. I mean, one of his quotes that just really gets to me, and anytime I see this behavior in my coaching sessions, he always puts the employees first,
right?
Not before shareholders or clients or suppliers or anyone in your ecosystem. So Richard says, hey, when you take great care of your people, everybody else is going to be well serviced. And I oftentimes find that the employees are a bit further down on the pecking order, and they can feel that. And anyone who comes in contact with them feels that. Yeah. And it's just not right. And a guy like him who spends a lot of his time teaching and sharing and giving that message to the world. So I just think the world of him. If I could meet any entrepreneur or hang out on Necker Island for a week, that's a guy I'd want to have some cocktails with till 2-3 in the morning and pick his brain, because just the fact that he has so many different brands and they're all very successful and they're all great cultures. He hasn't done it once; he's done it 7 or 8 times. So for me, that's a real winning entrepreneur. I think the world of him.
Yeah, I'm a big Branson fan too. I definitely am. Before we finish up, as we come to the end here, I want you to give us something practical, something that our leaders watching and listening can put into action. My preference is always to say in the next 24 hours, or at least the next 5 working days, that they can go and say, okay, here's what I'm going to go do based on what Chris Hallberg has said to me. This is what I'm going to do. What would be that one thing you would impress upon them to get off their ass and do?
Grab your employee roster, your organizational chart, whatever that is,
mm-hmm.
and just as simply as that, look at the job you're paying them to do and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, a 10 is Richard Branson, mm-hmm. the best in the business, right. and a 1 is somebody that couldn't find their ass with both hands. They couldn't do it, right? And then put a number right next to each one of those names, meaning if you had all the money in the world, you had access to nothing but 10s, and you could snap your finger and you could have one here tomorrow. We know it's not that easy, but that's the exercise. Go ahead and rate the people that work with you, below you, beside you, whatever. Anybody who's not a 7 or better, I would go out and start interviewing for that position. And then once you are eye to eyeball with an 8 or a 9 or a 10 or something like that, it's really easy to have that conversation with that other person when you've already found their replacement. I know that sounds a little backwards, but I find that people hang on to 5s and 6s and a lot of 7s because they don't feel that they could do better. So they never look, and therefore the thing just kind of replays itself. So just tomorrow, within 24 hours today, put a list on that, and then start at the lowest numbers. Everybody else knows they're a low number too. So if you've got any 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, fix that immediately. Yeah. If you're not willing to do that, you're not really a leader. Change your business card.
Love it. That is fabulous. That was great and powerful way to finish. If you're not willing to do that, you're not really a leader. That's pretty cool. That's it. Chris, this has been great. Please tell our audience, our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you, about your book, about the resources that you offer.
Yeah, my book, The Business Sergeant's Field Manual, available at Amazon.com. Also on my website, businesssergeant.com. That's BIZSGT.com. And my Traction EOS implementation business is TractionInc.com. TRACTIONINC.com.
Fabulous. And we'll make sure, of course, that those websites are posted on the show notes. Really want to thank you for being here today. It was a lot of fun. Really appreciate you being on and sharing all the great knowledge that you've shared. And I'm going to, on your behalf, push everybody to go and look at your website, go and have a look through that. But more than anything, as I say at the end of every show, don't listen to this show. For God's sake, it's not going to change your life or your business by listening. Do something with it. And to do that, you'll probably need to listen to it more than once. That's all it takes. Listen to it again a couple of times. Take some notes. I promise you there's going to be some really great stuff in here. And please, go get the book. Go get it. Put it in action. And remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing the most successful companies is somewhat counterintuitive, and these fast-growing companies often hit a point where they realize that they're spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing their talent, only to have those talent leave them at a horrendous rate. If you're sick of investing and training and developing your talent, only have them leave you before you've got your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into your purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. And also remember to stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need the www. Just matrix, like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. You'll be able to assess yourself into 5 areas of leadership. It's $197 value, absolutely free to you. Matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. I'm Dov Barron, I'm the host, and I want to thank you for joining us. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness so you can reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership. Before we go, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about where you're accepting a lower game, where you need to step up, have a bit more gonads, go after what it is you want, and come back to the basics of what it really takes to be a great leader with a great business. Until next time, Dov Barron, and I am out.